Imagine for a second that you're just going about your normal day. You know, you've got a playlist on shuffle in the background. Maybe you're doing the dishes or commuting, whatever it is.
Right, just totally zoned out.
Exactly, just doing your thing. And then suddenly you hear it. Just the most emotionally devastating, powerfully raw piece of music you have ever encountered in your entire life. I mean, it completely stops you in your tracks.
Oh yeah, where your heart rate actually changes.
Yeah?
You physically feel it.
Yes. So naturally, your first instinct is to pull out your phone, look at the artist's name, and you just want to dive right down the rabbit hole. You want to know everything, like who
Yeah.
is this genius? Where did they grow up? What kind of profound heartbreak produced this very specific sound?
Right, you want the whole backstory.
But when you search that name, there is absolutely nothing. I mean, no Wikipedia page, no Instagram account, no carefully curated celebrity mythology, nothing. It is almost as if the person who made this absolute masterpiece never even wanted to exist.
And that is such an incredibly jarring experience for a modern listener. I mean, to encounter a total void like that. Because we are fundamentally conditioned to expect the backstory right alongside the art.
Yeah, we want the whole package.
Exactly. We want a narrative. We want things to be, highly visible and easily categorized.
Well, and that void, that exact jarring feeling, is what we are exploring today on this deep dive. We're looking at the phenomenon surrounding an artist named Angine de Poitrine.
Which is a fascinating case.
It really is. But to be clear, we aren't doing a biography today, mostly because there is no biography to give you.
Right. There's literally nothing to tell.
Yeah. Instead, our mission with this deep dive is to explore how total anonymity actually functions as this profound artistic statement.
Yeah.
We're getting into why hiding the creator entirely might honestly be the only way to allow you, the listener, to hear the music clearly.
Because, think about it. We are living in an era where streaming algorithms and social media platforms, they just demand relentless exposure. Visibility isn't just a happy byproduct of making good art anymore. Visibility is the actual currency.
Oh, 100%. If you aren't seen, you basically don't exist.
Right. And so Angine de Poitrine's choice to disappear, it's not shyness. It's a deliberate philosophy. It is a complete rejection of the whole idea that an artist must be a public figure.
And it feels so radical today, doesn't it? But I think to really grasp why this choice to just vanish hits us so hard, we have to look back. We have to recognize how we even arrived at this point.
Yeah, how did we get here?
Exactly. Like, how did we build a culture where an artist's face, or, I don't know, their morning skincare routine, somehow became just as important as the literal sound they produce?
Well, it's funny because it's actually a surprisingly recent development in the grand timeline of human history. For centuries, music existed completely independently of individual fame. It was just a communal utility.
A utility, right, like a shared resource.
Yeah, exactly. Take medieval Gregorian chants, for instance. Those have completely anonymous origins. And that's because the focus was entirely on communion with the divine. It wasn't about the individual ego of the monk who happened to arrange the notes.
Right. The monks weren't exactly dropping mixtapes and trying to get famous.
No, definitely not. And the same goes for traditional folk music. Work songs, lullabies, sea shanties, these evolved dynamically through generations. They were passed down and tweaked by entire communities.
So you didn't really own a melody any more than you owned, like, a recipe for baking bread. It was just a cultural tool.
Exactly. Nobody was standing around the village square arguing about who held the intellectual property rights to a folk tune.
So when did that shift? When did we start obsessing over the creator?
That paradigm shattered with the arrival of the Romantic era. That's really when the culture began to elevate the composer into this archetypal, heroic individual, the tortured genius, the visionary.
Like Beethoven and all that intense mythology.
Yes, exactly. Suddenly, the creator is viewed as an irreplaceable lightning rod for divine inspiration, and their personal struggles become permanently intertwined with the value of their composition. Plus, the publishing industry grew around this concept because, let's be honest, it is much easier to sell the story of a genius than it is to just sell a sheet of paper with notes on it.
Well, and fast forward to today, and that romantic ideal of the tortured genius has mutated into something that honestly just looks exhausting. I mean, modern musicians are essentially forced to operate as full-time lifestyle influencers now.
Oh, absolutely. The pressure is insane.
You can't just drop a brilliant album and walk away anymore. You have to feed the beast. You need daily TikTok updates, a meticulously crafted personal narrative, reaction videos, and you have to cultivate these really intense parasocial relationships with your fans.
Yeah, they have to constantly feel like they're your best friend.
Right. And the music frequently feels like it's just the soundtrack to a larger lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
The human being is the product, and the song is just like top of funnel marketing to get you to buy into their life.
And I think that specific cultural exhaustion you're talking about is exactly what makes Angine de Poitrine's approach so striking. By completely removing their identity, their face, their backstory from the whole equation, they are quietly reversing centuries of that trajectory.
They're just opting out.
Totally opting out. They are demanding that the audience do something we are almost never asked to do in the modern world, which is simply listen. Just engage with the sound waves hitting your ears without the crutch of admiring or judging a personality.
Which makes me wonder what actually happens in the brain when we do that. Like, if we don't have a face or a brand or some tragic backstory to latch onto, how does the absence of that information physically alter our perception of the audio?
What really comes down to a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as expectation bias.
Okay, expectation bias.
Yeah. The human brain is essentially this highly advanced prediction machine, right? It constantly uses context to shape perception, meaning that the identity of the creator actively, literally, alters your sensory experience of their work.
Break down the mechanics of that for me. How does context actually change the physical hearing of a note?
Okay, so imagine you're sitting in a grand concert hall waiting to hear a piano sonata. If the program notes tell you, hey, this piece was composed by a Nobel Prize-winning polymath, your brain instantly primes itself for brilliance.
Right, you're ready to be amazed.
Exactly. Your critical barriers drop. You listen with this deep reverence. You might actually perceive deep complexity in the arrangement that isn't objectively there, simply because you expect it to be a masterpiece.
That makes total sense.
But now, imagine hearing the exact same sequence of notes, identical audio, but you are told this was written by an amateur teenager in their bedroom.
Oh, wow. Yeah, your framing shifts instantly.
Right. You raise your critical barriers.
Yeah.
You might listen for flaws or view it as raw potential rather than, refined mastery. The audio data entering your ears is identical, but your brain's processing of that data is entirely different based on the biography attached to it.
I understand the mechanism. I do, but I've got to push back a little here. I struggle to view total anonymity in the modern era as purely an artistic, noble sacrifice.
Okay, how so?
Well, in a culture driven by the attention economy, hiding your identity completely feels like a highly engineered hack to get more attention. I mean, the whole "I'm so mysterious" routine just makes people obsess over who you are even more intensely than if you had just posted a selfie, right?
That's a very fair point.
It creates a vacuum, and the internet loves nothing more than filling a vacuum.
It's true. It's a fair skepticism, and it taps into what behavioral psychologists call the curiosity gap.
The curiosity gap.
Yeah. The human brain despises incomplete information. When we're faced with a mystery, it creates this cognitive itch that we desperately want to scratch. Unanswered questions linger in our working memory much longer than solved puzzles.
So you're saying the obsession is biologically wired?
Yes. So when an artist like Angine de Poitrine vanishes, it triggers that curiosity gap massively. Fans will mobilize. They'll scour forums, analyze audio stems, share elaborate conspiracy theories trying to unmask the creator.
Which is exactly why it feels like a marketing gimmick to me. I mean, it generates endless free engagement.
It does generate engagement, but I think the distinction the source material makes here is about what happens to the art while that engagement is occurring.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, a traditional marketing gimmick uses a mystery just to get you in the door, right? Once the mystery is solved, the gimmick is over. But with this kind of profound anonymity, the missing biography is actually a structural component of the artwork itself.
Oh, interesting.
The uncertainty isn't just a temporary puzzle waiting to be solved. The void actively engages your imagination while you are listening.
Okay, I see what you mean. It changes who is carrying the emotional weight of the song. Like usually when a massive pop star releases a ballad about a brutal breakup, we are just renting their emotional experience.
Exactly. We're tourists in their sadness.
Yeah. We picture their famous ex-partner. We think about the paparazzi photos of them looking sad in a coffee shop. The song is basically a documentary about their life. But when an artist like Angine de Poitrine creates this total void, you can't picture their ex. You can't picture their life at all.
So what happens?
So the music stops being about the creator's story, and it reflects your own story. It becomes deeply intimate because the only emotional baggage you can attach to those chords is your own.
That's spot on. You're touching on a crucial reframing of how we view absence. We typically interpret a lack of biographical information as just a blank space waiting to be filled. But the philosophical perspective on this kind of anonymity suggests we should view it not as an absence, but as an active refusal.
A refusal, like a refusal to participate in the game at all.
Yes, it is a deliberate refusal to explain the work, a refusal to perform a marketable identity, and a refusal to reduce oneself to mere content for the algorithmic machine.
Wow.
And this connects directly to a major shift in mid-20th century literary theory, spearheaded by French philosophers like Michel Foucault and Roland Barthes.
Okay, wait. How does mid-century French philosophy map onto an anonymous musician in the age of Spotify?
Well, Foucault wrote this foundational essay called What is an Author? He analyzed how society uses the concept of the author to limit the meaning of a text. Basically, we use the author's biography to put strict boundaries around what a piece of art is allowed to mean.
Right.
And Roland Barthes pushed this concept even further in his famous essay, The Death of the Author.
Which I have to say, the death of the author is one of those phrases that sounds incredibly dramatic. But he isn't saying the person who made the art literally ceases to exist, or that they don't matter as a human.
Right. No, not literally. Barthes was arguing against our traditional habit of relying on the author's intentions and biography to decode a text.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say a musician writes this deeply melancholic song, and you listen to it and interpret it as a profound meditation on the passage of time and mortality.
Very deep.
Very deep. But then the musician does an interview and says, actually, I just wrote that because I lost my favorite jacket.
Oh, man, that just ruins it completely.
Exactly. Suddenly, your profound interpretation is killed. The author's stated intention closes the text. Barthes argued that to allow a text to be truly infinite, to allow it to hold multiple meanings for multiple people, the author must symbolically die.
So their intended meaning has to step aside.
Right. The ultimate meaning is not dictated by the creator, it is completed by the audience. As Barthes put it, the birth of the reader must come at the cost of the death of the author.
And Angine de Poitrine is literally enacting that philosophy. I mean, they're executing the death of the author in real time. Because they refuse to give us their intentions, the song remains infinite. It can mean whatever you, the listener, need it to mean in that moment.
That's exactly the point. By removing themselves, they force the listener to do the active work of completing the meaning.
And honestly, this feels incredibly urgent right now. Think about how we consume culture today. I feel like we rarely just hear a piece of music anymore. We hear a reputation.
Oh, entirely. There's so much baggage.
Right. We bring this massive cloud of external noise into our headphones with us. We are thinking about the artist's political affiliations, their recent internet controversies, who they're feuding with, their personal scandals. I mean, before the first note even plays, we've already run the artist through our own personal, moral, and ideological filters.
And anonymous art directly short-circuits that entire filtering process. When there's no face, no known socioeconomic status, no nationality, and no political affiliation to judge, prejudice becomes practically impossible to apply to the creator.
That's really powerful. It just strips it all away.
It does. It neutralizes one of the strongest sources of bias we possess. Now, obviously, it doesn't eliminate our own internal biases. We still project our own experiences onto the sound, but it forces the listener to judge the work purely on its aesthetic merits rather than the creator's social standing.
So this choice to step out of the spotlight, it isn't just an artistic quirk. It is an inherently political act, especially in a hyper-capitalist society that treats self-promotion as basically a moral obligation.
Yes. The modern economy is increasingly built on the idea that every individual is their own media company. You know this, you're encouraged, and honestly, often economically forced, to treat your personal identity as capital.
Yeah, you have to brand your quirks.
Brand your quirks, market your lifestyle, monetize your most private moments. Choosing invisibility within that specific economic system is a profound form of resistance.
A quiet rebellion.
Exactly. It declares that not everything valuable needs to be promoted. It insists that an individual's inner life is not for sale, and that an artistic experience can be entirely valid without a human face attached to it to sell it to you.
We've actually seen glimpses of how powerful this resistance can be with other artists, too. I mean, Angine de Poitrine is part of a lineage here.
Who comes to mind for you?
Well, look at Banksy in the visual art world. Banksy totally weaponized anonymity to critique the entire art establishment. If Banksy were just some guy named Dave from Bristol who did interviews on morning television, the art would lose its power.
Bro, instantly. It would just be Dave Street art.
Exactly. The anonymity shifts the public conversation away from who painted this to why is this image painted on this specific wall? It forces the public to engage with the vandalism and the message itself.
That's a great comparison. Another perfect parallel is the electronic musician Burial.
Oh, Burial.
Yeah, he produced these critically acclaimed, deeply atmospheric albums that capture the feeling of wandering through a rainy, decaying South London at 3 a.m.
Such a specific vibe.
Right. And for years, he allowed that music to exist completely outside of the celebrity ecosystem. He didn't do shows, he didn't do press, because if we had known he was just, a regular guy sitting in a comfortable flat making beats on his laptop, it would have shattered the spectral, ghost-like atmosphere of the music.
The mystery protected the atmosphere of the work.
Yes, exactly. It protected the work. And whether we were talking about Banksy, Burial, or Angine de Poitrine, the core insight from the sources remains the same. The focus of anonymous art shouldn't be on the missing person.
We shouldn't waste our energy staring at the empty chair.
No. The focus must be on what finally becomes visible in the room once the creator's massive ego steps out of the way.
Wow. What becomes visible once the ego steps out of the way? I love that. And that brings this whole concept right back to you, the person listening to this right now. It fundamentally challenges our daily habits.
How so?
Well, when we stumble across something new, a song, an article, a video, our immediate reflex is always to ask, who made this? Where are they from? What's their angle?
Which, to be fair, are completely natural evolutionary responses. We want to assess the source to understand the threat or the value.
They are natural, yeah, but they also limit our experience. Following the philosophy of Angine de Poitrine suggests we need to start asking entirely different questions.
Like what?
Well, instead of interrogating the identity of the creator, what if we asked, how does this sound actually make me feel? Or what does my reaction to this reveal about my own internal state? Even, how am I different after engaging with this?
I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. Because in a culture completely obsessed with speaking louder, pushing harder, and demanding to be seen at all costs, disappearing is the ultimate subversive communication.
It really is.
The artist voluntarily steps back. They give up the spotlight, the fame, the credit. And by doing so, they make room for the listener to finally appear. The anonymity isn't really about hiding the creator at all. It's about creating enough silent space for the audience to exist inside the art.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over today, something that takes this concept of the curiosity gap and applies it directly to how you move through the world.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, if anonymous art forces us to drop our biases, abandon our prejudices, and actively participate in creating meaning, what happens if we intentionally apply that to our everyday consumption?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right. Imagine scrolling through your daily news feed or your social media timeline and deliberately covering up the author's name, the publication's logo, or the profile picture before you read the content.
Wow.
Imagine forcing yourself to engage with the raw information, completely divorced from the brand reputation or the personality pushing it.
That would be a relentless, real-time exercise in identifying your own expectation biases.
Yeah.
I mean, you would constantly catch yourself wanting to know the source before deciding how to feel about the information.
Exactly, you'd feel that itch. But could doing that actually rewire our brains against the attention economy? If we train ourselves to make room for the art, or the idea, or the information, without desperately needing a face attached to it to tell us how to feel, maybe we start needing less external validation for our own digital identities, too.
That's a really profound thought.
Maybe we realize we don't actually need to be our own media companies. We can just exist and let our actions speak for themselves without the constant need for a billboard.
Just letting the work stand on its own.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It is an incredible challenge to our modern sensibilities because sometimes the most emotionally devastating, powerful piece of art you will ever encounter is the one that absolutely refuses to tell you who made it.